a bunch of cosplaying lunatics who were totally unqualified into positions of immense power, and you're seeing the dissipation of the entire government.
Right now, Republicans are finding out exactly what that costs, and I'm afraid it's going to be a bloodbath in November.
Welcome to Political Rehab. This week, cabinet turmoil, Congress exits, electoral setbacks, foreign policy confusion, different stories, one reality, a strain at the center that's rapidly breaking into chaos. So let's start, as always, with our Trump dump.
Time for the Trump dump.
Matt, you want to talk about chaos? Trump started a redistricting war, and in Virginia, it just blew up. A new map passes, threatens Republican seats, and within 24 hours, a judge blocks it as unconstitutional. This whole thing is a mess, and it's on Trump. Look, every map drawing fight comes down to one corrupt reality. It's about politicians picking their voters to protect their own power. It rigs the system before a single ballot is cast. As a GOP strategist, I say redistricting is just another way to use the rules to a Republican advantage. It's like Patrick Mahomes exploiting quarterback-friendly protections to rack up yards. It's legal, it's tactical, and yes, both parties do it. But I've been against this mid-decade redistricting. It isn't strategy, it's a bailout. I've called it reckless and un-American. But here's the thing. The Virginia map passed, and Trump didn't lift a finger to stop it. Now, maybe the Virginia Circuit Court judge ruling stays. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe this map becomes what Republicans are facing in November. If you're going to start a redistricting war, then at least fight. Win the damn war. You could have avoided all the legal wrangling in the beginning. Trump's super PAC is sitting on more than $300 million. You want to know how much he spent? Zero. Republicans got outspent 2-1 in this fight, and Trump did not spend a dime. He started the fight and didn't fund it. And now you got Republican members of Congress saying it was a mistake, saying they never should have gone down this road, saying they didn't think it through. And here's where it gets worse. Trump's team is out there with the same ridiculous spin about the loss. And the guy who told you to do this is sitting on $300 million like it's a museum piece. Meanwhile, what are Republicans doing? Republicans in Congress are introducing groundbreaking legislation that fixes American problems. Things like carving Trump's face into Mount Rushmore, or requiring the State Department to award a Trump Peace Prize, or, mint a $250 bill with Trump's image. That's not governing, that's tribute. They're giving him loyalty, total loyalty, and what are they giving back? No money, no backup, no protection, just risk. And so now they're stuck. Tougher districts, worse maps, slipping numbers, and they're the ones going to have to go home and explain it. Trump made the call, Republicans made the sacrifice, and now they're the ones paying for it. Because this is the deal with Trump. Loyalty is mandatory, support is optional. And right now, Republicans are finding out exactly what that costs. And I'm afraid it's going to be a bloodbath in November.
You're right, Matt. Trump always tells everyone else to sacrifice for him and then abandons them. And that's what he did to our allies this week after halting a U.S. resettlement program for Afghans who helped the American war effort. The Trump administration is reportedly considering forcing more than 1,100 of these allies who helped our military, our U.S. forces, to choose between relocation to the Democratic Republic of Congo or returning to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. To be clear, Congo is dealing with what is widely considered the world's second worst humanitarian crisis, with 600,000 plus refugees already there, according to the UN. The worst is Afghanistan. And these are people who the Taliban-led Afghan government considers traitors and who would be executed if caught. That is the choice Trump wants to give our friends, the ones who bravely worked with and likely saved the lives of our military at great risk to themselves and their families. This group includes former interpreters for the U.S. military, Afghan special operations members, family members of U.S. service members, and more than 400 children. These are not random migrants. These are people who risked their lives helping America during a 20-year war. People who fought for our country and their children and who earned a place at the front of the line. Many were moved to Qatar by the U.S. government and told they were on a pathway to U.S. resettlement after vetting. Then Trump betrayed them in a frenzy of anti-immigrant fervor. So the message now is help America, trust America, sacrifice for America, and then we will sacrifice you. But I'm angry not just because we're betraying 1,100 people who fought for us. I'm angry because Trump is betraying America's security for years to come. Don't you think that future translators, local allies, intelligence sources, anti-terror partners around the world are watching this? Isn't there a potential agent in Tehran, a military officer in Kabul, heck, even a driver in Cuba who's paying attention right now and realizing that a deal with Trump is like signing your own arrest warrant? If America uses people and discards them, no one is ever going to help us again. That means our fights will be much harder and our military will bear the brunt. Trump talks about strength. Betraying allies is weakness. It shows just how brittle we are. Because if this is how you treat friends who fought for you, if this is how easily we crumble, imagine what our enemies conclude. And speaking of crumbling, that's what we saw this week across 5 of the biggest stories in our rundown. Different themes, same reality, the growing strain at the center breaking into chaos. Let's hit our rundown. This week, the facade started cracking around Kash Patel. All of Washington spent the entire week talking about the bombshell report in The Atlantic, alleging that FBI Director Kash Patel has been erratic, impulsive, frequently inebriated, and often absent from the job, raising a basic question: who's actually running federal law enforcement right now? The Atlantic reporter Sarah Fitzpatrick interviewed more than 24 sources, including current and former FBI officials, to undergird the facts in the story. More and more, he looks like yet another sign of a Trump administration crumbling from within. Matt, what was your reaction to this whole firestorm around Patel?
I always knew we were going to be talking about a drunk Trump official. I just thought it was going to be Hegseth. Look, we have RFK cutting off raccoons' genitals. We have whale heads tied to his car, shirtless videos with Kid Rock. We have Hegseth quoting Pulp Fiction lines as Bible verses. Never mind Signalgate problem earlier this year. The truth is Patel fits into this club. The harsh reality for Republicans is that this is not what it should be. And for all my friends out there who want to say, oh, this is just a hit job, think about what you would say if this was Biden or if this was in Obama's administration. This is our government. This is our cabinet. These are people that we trust with information. These are people we trust with secrets, and it's hurting America. It's going to hurt us. And the fact that we're just turning a blind eye to it is going to be a real problem for us as a country.
It was really funny patterning. Patel made the classic Trump move of saying, I'm going to file a defamation lawsuit, which is promptly going to be dismissed, as was the suit that he fired against an MS Now commentator who pointed out that he's more frequently to be found in bars than actually at his desk. The judge was like, obviously, he's making fictitious comparison. No one believes that that's literally true. Suit dismissed. You're going to see the same thing here. It's the same thing Trump comes up with because a defamation lawsuit is the last refuge of a scoundrel. But the bigger pattern that this starts off, and we're going to get into more and more in the 5 stories that are all connected by a common theme this week, is this is a sign of a government that was never intelligently constructed. There was never an agenda. There was never a governing plan. They put a bunch of cosplaying lunatics who were totally unqualified for the job into positions of immense power. And what happened? Once they're there, they start crumbling and they start falling apart, and you're seeing the dissipation of the entire government. It's a pattern we're going to continue to see. And that's what happens when the chaos starts emanating from the very center.
Yeah, because it got ratcheted up this past week. Trump has already fired Kristi Noem. Trump already fired Pam Bondi. And this week, the Labor Secretary, Lori Chavez de Rimmer, resigned. Now, there's rumors that Trump has told Tulsi Gabbard she must resign by the midterms. It's obvious they all have one thing in common, and we want to say it's a war on women, but no, it's that they are all completely incompetent. There's a separate report that came out this week from Republicans in the Senate that if you're a cabinet official thinking of pursuing a new professional opportunity, now's the time to move on because the Senate is going to be a mess. Matt, what do you make about all these mass firings, resignation? Is it a war on women, or is it just pure incompetence?
It's a funny connection. I'll put it that way. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans' war on women was a theme that we used to run on, like back in 2012.
Binders full of women.
Your binder's full of women. It's true. Republicans did kind of walk into it, and Trump does seem to be walking into it. SNL had a hilarious part of the cold open a couple of weeks ago where James Austin Johnson, who does a brilliant job of playing Trump, noted that SNL cast member Ashley Padilla has happened to play Bondi and Noam, and maybe there's a little bit of a common thread here. But I think the bigger common thread is you can deal with incompetent staff. You can deal with incompetent cabinet members if you have a strong leader at the center. I've dealt with this. I'm not throwing any of the former staffers in congressional offices that I managed under the bus. I happen to have been blessed with very strong teams. But look, I've managed campaigns. You've managed campaigns. You've been an executive director. I've managed congressional offices. In every team, you are going to have some underperformers. Mm-hmm. You do it if you have strong leadership. Boy, that sounds like I'm patting myself on the back. You can do it. Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, is widely reputed to be very competent. Perhaps she is, but there's only so much you can do if the ultimate boss is coming apart at the seams. So really, this resignation this week is just a reflection of the same thing we were talking about last week. This is a leader whose grip on power is slipping. He barely had it to start with. The chickens are coming home to roost, and I expect more dominoes are going to continue to fall. I expect more heads to roll.
Trump sees the writing on the wall. The bloodbath is coming.
And you saw this kind of instability within the cabinet, the same turbulence going to an entirely separate branch of government, the Congress. We saw several resignations this week. Representative Eric Swalwell, a Democrat, Representative Tony Gonzalez, a Republican, Representative Sheila Phyllis McCormick, also a Democrat, and a cloud hanging over Republican Corey Mills, who's under heavy pressure to resign and facing calls of expulsion. I'm not trying to suggest that, especially with Democrats involved, that this is a direct symptom of Trump's chaos. On the other hand, it does seem like there's a domino effect going on here. What do you make of it?
This is part of the reason when you get, at least on my side, this Trump-aligned mess as we're going through these primaries and you're getting them into Congress, they are flawed candidates that in any other era probably doesn't make it through. But in the era of Trump, we're starting to get them. If you want to watch something really interesting, you see Corey Mills and Nancy Mace fight back and forth. Nancy Mace has already introduced trying to expel him from Congress. He's going nuclear on her. There's a lot of collateral damage. Now, look, we can all agree that every one of them should be out of Congress. If the charges are true or even remotely true, they should not be representing anyone.
No one is suggesting that it's Donald Trump's fault that Eric Swalwell is an alleged serial sexual harasser and possibly worse. But the link here is there really seems to be no command presence at the wheel. You have a House Speaker who has turned over his entire governing agenda, his entire control of the institution in subservience to the president. He doesn't have an independent agenda, and he doesn't really have independent governing authority. He's not a strong presence like Nancy Pelosi was, like Sam Rayburn was 70 years ago. When you see this kind of internecine warfare between Mills and Mace, when you have members of Congress sniping at each other, even within their own party, it's a sign that there's a deeper dysfunction going on under the surface at circus. See, there was a slip of the tongue, a little Freudian slip there. And it's also a postcard from the future, because with a razor thin majority, the ability to do any actual governing is in more peril than it's ever been before.
And part of this is our own doing. And that's where we get into the redistricting. Now, we know Virginia just approved a new map, but also what happened is a Virginia Circuit Court judge ruled one day after the Democrat redistricting referendum passed that all votes for or against the proposed redistricting amendment were unconstitutional, citing rules that imposed certain requirements the referendum did not meet. This is completely of our own doing. Trump went on a rant as soon as the redistricting came through. My favorite part, because I have to read it and then I got to show a clip at the end of his Truth Social post. As everyone knows, I'm an extraordinarily brilliant person, and even I had no idea what the hell they were talking about in the Republican referendum. Matt, it sounded like this to me.
I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart.
And I know that's just a cheap shot, but still, that's what this comes down to. is we have this redistricting. We're going to lose seats. And you got the president of the United States who's just sitting out there saying, I'm smart.
I wrote in Newsweek when Republicans kicked off this mid-cycle redistricting process in Texas about a year ago, I wrote that this was the stupidest fight. I agree with you a little bit where you were in your Trump dump. The mid-cycle redistricting is stupid and underhanded. I disagree that this is a normal conventional tool of governing. I laid it all out in that Newsweek article. First of all, it has the propensity to backfire. That's what's happening here. This turned from a gerrymander into a dummy mander. The most recent projections, especially if this Virginia redistricting goes through, after all the redistricting wars that Republicans kicked off, concluded across all the states, it's going to turn into a net gain of between 2 and 6 seats for Democrats. So they shot themselves in the foot with it. But the thing that really frosts me is that when you go to the nuclear option, as Republicans did with this dirty, underhanded, predatory gerrymandering scheme, Democrats are left in a position of, let's just bring a knife to a gunfight. Let's just hope that they're merciful with us, or we can fight fire with fire, which means we do in Virginia that which we claim to be against, which makes us seem hypocritical, but it's the only way to fight back, or we lose, because that's the reality of politics. It's a race to the bottom, and it seems like somehow Trump and his Republican Party have managed to lose it.
And here's what nobody is talking about, and this is what is extremely important. You're diluting Republican districts. And so in each of these, you may make it look like you've got more Republicans, but you put more districts on the map, you make it a bigger opportunity for us to lose. And you're going to wipe out an entire piece of the Republican Party because you're playing these silly games.
And if you thought that the chaos that we're seeing on the domestic side wasn't enough, it has continued to spill abroad in Trump's war with Iran. The last week is very hard to summarize. We saw on again, off again ceasefire talks, Trump indefinitely extending the ceasefire, calling off renewed attacks, but no sign that Iran had agreed to matching terms. We saw a diplomatic track, J.D. Vance leading a U.S. delegation that was on again, off again. The Strait of Hormuz was open and closed again. The entire thing was like a Monty Python sketch, the race for incontinence, where first one guy's in the lead, then he jumps into the woods to go pee, and then the next guy's in the lead. It's very hard to get a handle on this, but it seems to me that this is highly connected. The lack of any kind of a plan, grasping for any kind of an off-ramp. And Iran isn't playing ball. They're not giving him one. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes. Look, and I think the other side of this, which you touched on, is just the competing messages that Trump likes to give. And the number one out there is gas prices and whether they're going to come down and is this war over. A Pentagon source has told lawmakers that the strait could be closed for 6 months. That's a disaster. But Trump's still out there saying, no, these gas prices are going to fall down. It's going to be down below $3. The reality is, the longer this thing happens, the longer this continues to unfold, the longer the strait is closed, the more damage it's doing to the American economy. And it's one of the key factors that's going to get into this bloodbath Republicans are going to see in November.
Just to tie back to your gas price theme, there was a Republican confab. As an anti-Trump Republican, I don't believe that you were invited
to take that invite list.
It was Susie Wiles presenting, and she presented a strategy to Republicans this week of, we have to attack Democrats. That's our strategy for the midterm. Let me tell you something, as a former campaign manager and congressional chief of staff, I've been on the other side of this, of a White House telling us, okay, we have to go on offense. We have to attack. When that was 2010, right before the midterm shellacking the Democrats underwent. And it's a clear sign of a party that knows it has nothing to run on and no defense for their own positions. Therefore, the only avenue left is attack. That's the only way out, is to try to go on offense, because there's nothing you can say to defend your own side. I'm pretty sure that whole White House meeting about strategy was set to the music of the Rains of Castamere. But look, we've spent this whole episode so far looking at the visible signs of strain, the scandals, firings, resignations, the electoral setbacks. Often the most revealing thing about a crumbling power structure isn't the chaos that everyone sees, It's what the power center is trying to hide. And that takes us back to some work that you did in the run up to the show to look at the clearest symbol yet of a government that's veering into vanity, corruption, and decadence.
Matt GPT, I have a question. Can Donald Trump tear down the East Wing and let private donors pay for a ballroom?
Why did a secret group of billionaires pay to tear down the East Wing to build a ballroom? And why did the government go to court to make sure you never found out who they are? I got the contract. Here's what's in it. The entire fundraising operation runs through a contract between the White House, the National Park Service, and a nonprofit called the Trust for the National Mall. That contract was secret. The government never disclosed it. And what's in it is exactly what they don't want you to see. The contract explicitly shields donor identities. And here's the part that should make you angry. The conflict of interest review written into that contract covers the Park Service and the nonprofit, but it specifically excludes the White House, raising serious questions about transparency. Now think about what that means. Companies with billions in government contracts, Amazon, Lockheed Martin, Google, can write a check to the president's personal legacy project and nobody has to know. No disclosure, no scrutiny, no conflict of interest review. And here's the problem for Trump. Once you start pulling this thread, the names start coming out. And some of those names have a very specific problem. They've donated to the ballroom, and within days, they got something back. Now, the White House will tell you this is perfectly normal. They'll point to Jackie Kennedy using private donors to restore the White House. They'll point to the Washington Monument. But here's the difference. Jackie Kennedy restored furniture and artwork inside an existing building. The Washington Monument was authorized by Congress first. Private money came in after. Neither precedent involves a president demolishing a federal building without congressional approval and replacing it with new construction funded by anonymous donors who have business before his administration. But first, let's start with the basics. He can't do any of this. Congress controls federal spending. That's the appropriations clause. And Congress controls federal property, which means if you're building, demolishing, or altering something like the White House, the president doesn't get to decide that alone. Then there are the laws. Major changes triggered requirements under the National Historic Preservation Act and the National Environmental Policy Act, both requiring review before a project like this can move forward. And here's the key point. It doesn't matter who pays for it. You can't just take a billionaire's check and build something on federal property. That's not how federal law works. And that's where this stops being about architecture, because now the questions are obvious. Who are the donors? What do they want? What do they get? Here's one answer. A company donated $37 million in steel to the ballroom. When Trump announced it, nobody knew who the company was. 2 days later, the White House cut tariffs in half on automotive steel from one of their plants. That's just one transaction. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, all ballroom donors were simultaneously involved in shaping the White House AI action plan. The same companies that wrote checks to the president's personal project were in the room helping write policy that directly affects their businesses. Whether they benefit is a question no one can answer, because the contract was designed to make sure you never found out who's paying or what they were promised. Maybe nothing improper happened, but the structure allows the question, and if you don't even know who's paying, you can't even begin to answer it. This isn't a ballroom, it's three-card Monte. Watch the hand talking about saving money, and you miss the hand where access is being sold. That's the game, and it's happening right in front of you.
Matt, the first thing that jumps out to me from that excellent backgrounder segment is this just rings of a certain kind of history. The same case of Roman elites financing monuments and games, bread and circuses, right? To display power while the institutions of government got weak. Emperors like Nero and Commodus, who became associated with spectacle and luxury and self-image, while the strain on the center of power mounted. You can draw the same parallel to Tsarist Russia, the same parallel to Haiti under Baby Doc Duvalier, who was eventually overthrown. So that's really the common theme. When you see a government that becomes solely devoted to the self-image of the leader, to aggrandizement and to enrichment, and dealing out favors, subtle hints, a flow of government funds to their favored friends, it seems to be a historic prescription for a mass revolt and the crumbling of that regime.
And the thing that I find so interesting about this story, and we've touched on the ballroom in previous episodes along the way, but everybody, the news and social media, it's all about, do we need a ballroom? But that's not the question. Then they want to talk about the legality of it. Can Trump do it? He can't. But that's not the question. The issue, and the thing that I think everybody should be talking about here, is the fact that this is being funded by private donors, being sold to everybody as, look at this, I'm saving government money. But the reality is we have laws against this to protect against corruption. This is a pay-to-play scheme. And so all these companies that are under government contract that are funding this, we don't know who's all being funded because the White House is not disclosing those donors. And now they're getting government contracts. They're enriching themselves off something. And that's only the things that we know. And so we have a government that is too big, too corrupt, and too controlled by special interests. And for my Republican friends, you may remember that because that's what we've said for decades. But what we're doing now is we have a corrupt president and a Congress that wants to look the other way.
I think that's the key insight of your look at the ballroom. The ballroom story isn't an opulence story. It's not a hubris story. This is a corruption story. And it really ties back to the conversation we had last week in my That's Bullshit series about the one big beautiful bill. And the fact that we fundamentally agree that if you and I wanted to construct, as a Republican and a Democrat, a middle-class tax cut, we could do it in a way that's a lot leaner, that has a much bigger economic punch, much better for the middle class, much more efficient, much less waste. And instead, what Trump and the Republicans in Congress who were under his thumb did with his one big beautiful bill was a massive $4.3 trillion giveaway to their wealthiest donors, $1 trillion going to the top 1%. Much of the rest of the tax giveaways going to extraordinarily wealthy corporations, all of which is essentially a payoff. That's really the story of this ballroom.
Yeah, and that's why, and I think people underestimate Trump in this way. That's why he talks about the opulence. He says it's private funds. And as we saw in this segment, that's three-card Monte. He has you talking about the opulence. He has you talking about the size. He has you talking about the need, but you ignore the corruption. You ignore the pay to play. And that's the real issue here. And that's the thing that has to be fixed.
Speaking of trying to cover over a completely broken situation, it's a perfect tie-in to this week's edition of That's Bullshit.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
A bullshit?
President Donald Trump spent years blasting Obama's Iran nuclear deal. So why is he on the verge of making the exact same deal, but worse? We're going to get to the bottom of it here. So let's back up and talk about what was in the deal that President Barack Obama struck in 2015, what Trump said about it, and what he's apparently on the verge of doing now. And then you decide whether this is the most hypocritical case of delusional political rebranding you've ever heard of. Back in 2015, then President Barack Obama made an agreement called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. The core bargain was that Iran would sharply restrict its nuclear program and allow it to be carefully monitored by the international community, and in exchange, it would get phased relief from economic sanctions. The deal had a few basic elements, and I'll let our friends at the Wall Street Journal explain, and note, I'm intentionally choosing anything but a left-wing source.
Number 1. The deal requires Iran to give up 97% of its enriched uranium, taking its stockpile from 10,000 kilograms down to just 300 kilograms. Number 2. Iran can still produce a modest amount of uranium enriched at low levels, just 3.67%. Enrichment is limited in this way for 15 years. Number 3. Reduction of centrifuges. Centrifuges are the machines used to enrich uranium. Iran has to give up 2/3 of its centrifuges. There will be, number 4, inspection. UN inspectors will be allowed to monitor nuclear and other sites. So what does Iran get for accepting all of this? Number 5, sanctions relief.
To be fair, this was anything but a perfect deal. There were definitely criticisms one could make, including that the deal did not totally end Iran's nuclear ambitions. But here's the key point.
If Iran abides by the deal, for the next decade, it will take Iran at least 12 months to produce enough fuel for a nuclear weapon.
That's the upshot. There was broad consensus that Obama's deal put Iran at least a year away from getting a nuclear bomb. That gets us to point number 2. What did Trump say about this deal? Over the years, Trump has done his usual hyperbolic name-calling performance, saying it's the worst deal in history, incredibly stupid, and when he addressed the nation on his war with Iran several weeks ago, he said,
"A disaster."
But amidst all of that, it seems like he had 3 basic criticisms. First, that it would have led to Iran having lots of nuclear weapons.
His Iran deal would have led to a colossal arsenal of massive nuclear weapons for Iran.
Although it's a little unclear whether he means lots of them or that they're just really, really big. Second, that they could achieve nuclear capacity really fast.
They would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks to 4 weeks.
Again, this is a little confusing since, like I just said, experts agreed that it was actually a year, and his own threat assessment from 2025 said the same thing. And finally, Trump was upset that part of Obama's deal involved sanctions relief, which included releasing funds that had been frozen. And he was so upset that he made sure you knew exactly where this money sits on the color wheel.
Obama gave them $1.7 billion in cash. Green cash.
Green cash? I mean, the thought of it! I didn't know we were talking about green cash. And that gets us to the third piece of this here. What is Trump planning to include in his version of the deal to end his current war with Iran? And this is where, again, I want to be clear that there is no final deal yet. In fact, one of the unintentionally hilarious parts of the last few weeks of this ceasefire, which is not really a ceasefire, is that Trump says that we're really close to a deal, and we're not, because as I summarized in the edition of That's Bullshit from 2 weeks ago, clearly Iran's list includes all kinds of things that the U.S. would never agree to and would represent an unconditional surrender by America. Iran would maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz, we'd lift all of our sanctions, we'd accept their nuclear program, and we'd pay them reparations. But multiple press reports from sources inside the administration, including from the Associated Press, Reuters, and the Washington Post, have confirmed that basically what Trump is looking to do is take each of the key elements of Obama's deal, hit copy and paste, put a red hat on them, and call them his deal. What they're looking to offer is limits on uranium enrichment, limits on how much uranium Iran can stockpile, an inspection and monitoring program, sanctions relief, including releasing some frozen Iranian assets, and a time limit on the whole deal. In fact, the only real difference here is that Trump's deal is worse. He's talking about releasing up to $20 billion of Iranian assets. It's a lot more than Obama's $1.7 billion. And never forget that Obama made his deal when Iran possessed essentially a zero stockpile of nuclear material. By 2025, that had risen to almost 1,000 pounds, enough for almost a dozen nuclear weapons, were it eventually enriched to weapons grade level. And the reason they had all that nuclear material? Because Trump tore up Obama's deal. The bottom line is, Trump wants to offer them the same deal with more money from a worse starting point because he petulantly canceled the earlier deal, which leads us at the end to where we started. Why? As best we can tell, Trump tore up the Obama deal just because it had Obama's name on it. The very fact that he's now seeking the exact same deal after fighting a war that he claims to have won shows that there was never any logic or substance or care for America's national security interest. There was just spite and retribution and a massive inferiority complex. Endangering our national security for your petty vendetta makes you a traitor. But here, just to be polite, let's call it bullshit. All right, and with that, let's get to our weekly dose of hope.
Okay, this might be my favorite story of the week. There is a MAGA political influencer who's racked up millions of followers with patriotic content of her posting in a bikini while ice fishing, drinking Coors Light and shooting guns. Big following, tons of engagement, people in the comments going at it. Turns out she's not real. Not like filtered Instagram, not real, like no human being at all. The whole account, AI. It was revealed that it's a guy in India who put himself through med school on the proceeds of his trickery. Subscriptions, selling MAGA-themed t-shirts, people sending money. Thousands of dollars a month. Real audience, real engagement, real money. People in the comments taking it seriously, following it, responding to it, treating it like it was a real voice in politics. And it's not just one. Hundreds of fake pro-Trump avatars have emerged on social media. The AI generated fake influencers have surged on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube in an apparent bid to hook conservative voters. As a quick side note, this guy in India said that he also attempted to make a liberal counterpart on Instagram, but, quote, Democrats know that it's AI slop and they don't engage as much. And that's the point. I didn't pick this because people got scammed, although it's kind of funny. I picked it because when you strip it all away, a lot of what you're seeing online is just made up garbage. And it also might be the best evidence yet that AI is going to take over the world, not because it's smarter, but because it figured out you can just dress it up and make it an attractive blonde.
I agree with you. That makes me very hopeful when you manage to pull a scam like that on the MAGA base. And speaking of a big reveal that's blowing up on MAGA, I want to talk about a little springtime Christmas present waiting under all of our trees, because this week, after the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's economy-wrecking tariffs were totally illegal, the administration quietly launched a tariff refund website and claims process. According to multiple reports, roughly 56,000 American businesses had already registered in the first wave. Trade groups estimate that as many as 330,000 U.S. companies could ultimately qualify for refunds tied to more than 53 million shipments affected by the tariffs, with a total value to be refunded reported at roughly $166 billion. What's incredible about all of this is that there's a mystery hiding in plain sight here, and almost nobody has said it out loud yet. Trump spent years telling Americans that tariffs were paid by China, by foreign countries, by nations taking advantage of us. But if foreign countries paid the tariffs, why are the refunds going to Americans? Why are American importers the ones asking for and getting their money back? Because, tariffs are actually paid by the importer, i.e., the American business, for bringing goods into the United States. Those costs often move through supply chains to businesses and consumers, or both, which means we pay the tariffs. We always have. And this has become one of the great emperor has no clothes moments in modern politics. By setting up this website, Trump just took his pants off and started walking down the street. Now, people haven't started shouting and pointing yet. They will, because once the media wakes up, the painfully awkward question will start. If China paid the tariffs, why are Americans getting the refunds? Oh, I can't say that enough. And that future is there. It's sitting under the tree right now, waiting to be opened. The anticipation is delicious. And the best part, the present was shipped duty-free. And on that note, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next.